Take a listen to an excerpt of what our next guest wrote in a blog on truthdig.com on March 14th. Quote, "The liberal class has busied itself with the toothless pursuits of inclusiveness, multiculturalism, identity politics, and tolerance, and forgotten about justice." So says Pulitzer Prize winner Chris Hedges in a piece entitled "Power Concedes Nothing Without Demand." That quote, "Power concedes nothing without demand. It never did, it never will," taken from the words of Frederick Douglass in 1857. Chris Hedges goes on to write, quote, "Across the country, governors brazenly continue their assault on public workers and their collective bargaining their collective bargaining rights. Workers in this country paid for their rights by suffering brutal beatings, mass expulsions from company housing and jobs, crippling strikes, targeted assassinations of union leaders, and armed battles with hired gun thugs and state militias. The Rockefellers, the Mellons, the Carnegies, and the Morgans, the Koch brothers, Industries, Goldman Sachs, and Walmart, all of their day, never gave a damn about workers. All they cared about was profit. The 8-hour workday, the minimum wage, Social Security, pensions, job safety, paid vacations, retirement benefits, and health insurance were achieved because hundreds of thousands of workers physically fought a system of capitalist exploitation." Chris Hedges, Pulitzer Prize winner, also the author of many other volumes, including his latest, Death of the Liberal Class, and Empire of Illusion, The Death of Literacy and the Triumph of Spectacle, published by Nation Books, joins us now. Chris Hedges, good morning. Welcome to Wake Up Call.
Thank you.
Powerful, wide-ranging piece. That first quote, "The liberal class busying itself with these toothless pursuits." Expand and explain what you mean by that.
Well, that preoccupied huge swaths of especially academia, but infected all institutions. And meanwhile, there was an assault, a brutal assault carried out against the working class and increasingly the middle class in this country, with the destruction of the manufacturing base, the destruction of unions, so that we watched households slip away over the last few decades until we have been left with situation we have now. As much of a third of the country living in poverty or near poverty, and people are, of course, suffering, as all of your listeners know, in a myriad of ways, whether it's being foreclosed from their homes or not being able to find an adequate job, or, our real unemployment rate when you count workers who have stopped looking for work or are in poorly paid part-time jobs. You go to Walmart, the average worker at Walmart works 28 hours a week, which keeps them below the poverty line, and Walmart hands them an application for food stamps. In essence, we subsidized Walmart, and we forgot that the system, as it was configured by the founding fathers, who were deified by the right and the left, was a system against popular democracy. Slaves, Native Americans, women, people without property, none of these people were represented at the Constitutional Convention. And as Howard Zinn has pointed out, American democracy was something that had to be fought for. And now that we have permitted these radical and populist forces to wither, we face a situation where the corporate elite once again has complete control of all levers of power, and they will do what they did in the past, which is create a kind of neo-feudal system. The middle class was created by unions, created by, as the passage you read, created off of the tremendous bravery and suffering and even death of American workers who fought back. And just to get back to where we are, there's going to be hell to pay.
And so is part of what you're saying that liberals have essentially abandoned this battle and this fight, and they've retreated in this fight for and jockeying for position that is all symbol and no substance?
Yeah, and it was essentially used to integrate into the power system itself. Multicultural studies just within universities became another 10-year track route. And I'm all for opening up, of course, institutions. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but to preoccupy ourselves with that while there was this egregious attack on the part of the ownership class against working men and women, and not to respond was very foolish.
And so turning this around, I mean, in the context of what's happening in Wisconsin, that we're in the middle, the depths of the global economic crisis, natural disasters, I mean, the list is long and goes on. What do liberals need to do to turn it around? You read extensively about the death of the liberal class, and when you were here, you talked about them essentially committing suicide. So if we're going to talk resurrection, how do we turn this around?
Not through liberal institutions. Liberal institutions have been either utterly defanged in the case of labor, or in the case of education or the press, essentially swallowed up by corporate power and subservient to corporate power. So Wisconsin is important, but let's remember what they're fighting for in Wisconsin. They're fighting for collective bargaining, and temporarily and maybe permanently they've now lost. They're fighting for even the right to ask for decent working conditions. That is how far we have descended. And unless the resistance in Wisconsin broadens, I'm going to be there in a few days, and let's hope it will, unless we start talking about general strikes, unless we talk about replicating the occupation of state houses across the country, there will be no way to thwart this assault by corporate forces, because traditionally liberal institutions which had made incremental or piecemeal reform possible no longer function. Of course, the greatest culprit of that is the Democratic Party itself, and all you have to do is look at the presidency of Barack Obama.
And expand on that, how the presidency of Barack Obama epitomizes some of what you're talking about.
Well, it's a replication of the presidency of Bill Clinton, where you speak in the traditional language of liberalism and liberal values, and yet carry out this corporate assault against the working class. And, you know, the Democratic Party has, I think, engendered a tremendous amount of rage among many of the dispossessed, and a very legitimate rage, because of its hypocrisy, because the language that it speaks no longer matches the actions that it carries out. We have seen absolutely no effort on the part of the Obama administration to control the malfeasance of Wall Street, which swallowed up $17 trillion in wages and retirement benefits and savings, and is now sitting around taking it out on the backs of public sector unions and working men and women in this country. No effort to ameliorate the suffering of people being foreclosed and driven from their homes because of bank repossessions. No effort to tackle the kind of permanent situation of mass unemployment or underemployment. No effort to create a viable healthcare system. Instead, of course, turning around and writing in the Obama healthcare bill essentially $400 billion of subsidies for the healthcare industry. It becomes the equivalent of the bank bailout industry for the pharmaceuticals. I mean, the list of no restoration of habeas corpus, expansion of what are illegal wars and under post-Nuremberg laws, this permanent war policy in Iraq, on and on and on.
And
there is no substantial difference between what John McCain would have done and what Barack Obama is doing.
And so with that devastating analysis, as we close, let's talk resistance. You spoke about general strike and expanding the kind of resistance that we're seeing. Talk about how far does it need to expand in order that some of the battles being waged, and it certainly feels like the working people are under siege by the classes above them in the name of the maintenance of their profit. Talk about resistance and how that needs to be expanded to the same degree that the fight in the war is being waged against working people.
Well, it's got to be physical. You know, we've got to go back and read Big Bill Haywood and Mother Jones and Eugene Debs and all these people who understood that the interests of the owning class are not our interests. They never were, they never are, and they never will be. And until we learn to speak in that language of class war, we don't even have a vocabulary to describe what's happening to us. And until we learn to speak in that language and fight, as our forebears did, for our rights, whether it's the suffragists, whether it's the Liberty Party, whether it's the Civil Rights Movement, it's out in the street. And I'll be down in Washington on the 19th for the 8th anniversary of the war in Iraq with Veterans for Peace and Iraq Veterans Against the War and others protesting once again outside the White House. It's more time than I want to donate getting arrested, but that is all we have left, and we have become the last line of defense in the protection of a civil democracy, because if we are not out there and we are not willing to put our bodies on the line, then we are going to cede opposition to very frightening movements, configurations like the Tea Party that celebrate the gun culture, that have an utterly irrational political agenda. I mean, these people, want to get government off our backs, but don't consider the military part of government, filled with undercurrents of bigotry, racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism. It's not a new story. It's called fascism. And either we get out there or we're finished.